The first discussion topic on today's Peace and Prosperity is North Korea's intentions behind the increasingly bellicose rhetoric against the U.S. Kim Yong-chol, vice chairman of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party, who disappeared from the public eye after the breakdown of the Hanoi summit, released a statement on October 27th, stressing the year-end deadline. He said Washington has been trying to isolate and stifle the North, adding an exchange of fire could happen at any moment. What does the timing of Kim Yong-chol's return signify? Is the North preparing for another provocation? We take a look at what is behind its tough statements. Today's second discussion topic is North Korea's request to withdraw South Korean facilities from the North's Mount Geumgangsan resort. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ordered on October 23rd that all South Korean facilities at the resort be torn down. 2 days later, the North sent a notice telling the South to send a team to the resort to tear down the facilities there. Pyongyang was willing to resume tours to Mount Geumgangsan. What can explain the sudden change in its position? Can it lead to a potential breakthrough in long-stalled dialogue between the two Koreas? To shed light on these developments, our host, Bong Young-sik, Research Fellow at Yonsei University's Institute for North Korean Studies, is joined by Go Myong-hyun, Research Fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Broaden the perspective, we also connect with guest experts on Skype, including John Feffer, Director of Foreign Policy and Focus at the Institute for Policy Studies, and Stephen Noerper, Senior Director of the Korea Society.
Hello and welcome to our program. Pyongyang has been escalating its rhetoric against Seoul and Washington since the North Korea-US working-level talks in Stockholm ended without a deal. What are the North's intentions behind the tough talk? Joining with us today to help break down the latest developments is Dr. Go Myong-hyun, a research fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Welcome to our studio.
Thanks for having me.
Right. We have to examine the tough talks coming from Pyongyang, especially the return of Vice Chairman of the State Affairs Committee, the appointment, Mr. Kim Yong-chol. And he kind of issued a warning that exchange of fire between Pyongyang and Washington can happen at any moment. What do you make of his return and this very harsh rhetoric?
Well, it's a kind of a expected move on the part of North Korea. I mean, we know what Kim Yong-chol represents in the perception held by the international community and South Korea, despite the fact that he was a point diplomat, so to speak, in negotiating with the United States and South Korea throughout last year and this year, part of this year at least.
Yes.
Kim Yong-chol has this, image of a headliner, like a military man,
Right.
somebody who's excels at cover operation. So essentially, he's the perfect vehicle to send a very strong message to the United States. So I think the reason why Kim Yong-chol has reappeared at this instance is because North Korea is in the process of upping the ante or pressure on the United States to essentially agree to North Korean terms of negotiations, which in this case would mean take the tentative steps towards recognizing North Korea as a nuclear state. So, in that process, North Korea is using Kim Yong-chol to send a message that North Korea is going to escalate from now on, not just in terms of provocation, but in terms of rhetoric and also diplomatic pressure. So, we have to see this in a context in which North Korea has not just sent Kim Yong-chol to send this message, but also when North Korea threatened to shut down and remove the South Korea's facilities in Geumgang Mountain. So these are all parts of a North Korean campaign to increase pressure on the international community and the United States.
So does it mean that North Korea is ready to walk away from dialogue and negotiations? Does it mean that North Korea is no longer interested in doing diplomacy towards South Korea and toward the United States?
Well, we have to separate, in this case, United States from South Korea.
Okay.
When it comes to South Korea, North Korea has signaled and then actually reaffirmed over and over from the very top level, meaning Kim Jong-un, that North Korea doesn't want to deal with or talk to South Korea.
Okay.
So there's no hope for diplomacy, at least in this instance
Okay.
with
South Korea, you need to step down.
Exactly.
Step aside. Right?
Exactly. That was the only single message, very consistent message coming from
What about
Pyongyang.
toward the United States?
But it's totally different when it comes to the United States. If you read the statement given by, latest statement by Kim Yong-chol, it shows that, even though North Korea is criticizing the United States, it shows that North Korea wants certain terms to be accepted by the United States. That's very detailed in the statement. Even though the rhetoric itself is not very friendly, we know that from the content that North Korea still wants to negotiate with the United States.
I see. In fact, Pyongyang's continued belligerent rhetoric is a testament to its growing impatience, driven by Washington's latest foreign policy admission that looks like a warning to the North. Here's more on the story.
Kim Gae-kwan, North Korea's foreign ministry advisor and former nuclear envoy, released a statement on October 24. He claimed Washington's policymakers remain hostile toward the North and urged the U.S. to come up with a new approach for their denuclearization talks by the end of this year. The next day, on October 25th, 2 American B-52 strategic bombers flew over the East Sea in a show of force, raising tensions on the Korean Peninsula. B-52 strategic bombers are one of the 3 elements in the U.S. military's nuclear triad, alongside intercontinental ballistic missiles and submarine-launched ballistic missiles. They are known to be a strategic weapon that the North fears the most. 2 days after the U.S. mission, Kim Yong-chol, vice chairman of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party, who had been absent from the public eye since the failed Hanoi summit in February, made a comeback. In a statement, Kim said Washington is seeking to isolate and stifle North Korea in a vicious way, and warned an exchange of fire could happen at any moment. Through the statements by the 2 senior officials, Pyongyang has once again highlighted its year-end deadline. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that a U.S.-led attack in Syria prompted Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to kill himself.
Bin Laden was a big thing, but this is the biggest there is. This is the worst ever.
It remains to be seen how North Korea will react to the B-52 bomber mission over the East Sea and the U.S. raid that killed the ISIS leader.
Well, we are aware of the B-52 bomber mission near the Korean Peninsula, which took place very recently. What do you make of this strategic move by the Trump administration and how North Koreans perceive this?
Oh, it's essentially, you can say it's a counter move on the part of the United States on the North Koreans' provocation through SLBM launch and the short-range missile launches that occur throughout the last couple of months. And the reason why United States is using the strategic bomber B-52 in this case is because it's one of the most important assets the United States military can deploy in case of a contingency in the Korean Peninsula, meaning to attack North Korea. And also at the height of the tension back in 2017, there was a case in which the American strategic bombers, not just B-52, but another one, B-1B,
B-1B, right?
that flew very close to Punggye-ri nuclear test site, essentially undetected by North Korea's air defense system. And North Korea didn't know about it until the United States military announced it the day after.
Right.
So this kind of examples, I mean, the latest move on the part of the U.S. military, essentially reminding North Korea that the U.S. is totally capable of, taking the counter move or even retaliate against any kind of a North Korean provocation that might cross the red line. So I think this is a reminder, a gentle reminder, I would say, on the part of the U.S. military.
I see. Now we'll hear observations from the U.S. on this matter. Joining us on the line is John Feffer, Director of Foreign Policy in Focus at the Institute for Policy Studies. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Feffer.
Thank you for having me on the show.
My first question to you, Dr. Feffer, is the impact of what happened in the Middle East. Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi killed himself during the U.S. military raid. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un must have mixed feelings watching this. Your take on this?
Well, I think that Kim Jong-un probably does not think of himself in the same category as al-Baghdadi. Obviously, he has met with Donald Trump several occasions, exchanged very nice letters, according to the American president. And to put it simply, al-Baghdadi did not have that kind of relationship with Donald Trump. And although there are obviously some people who consider North Korea a terrorist state, obviously Donald Trump does not consider North Korea a terrorist state. So I think that from the point of view of the American president, he has two categories of foreign policy accomplishment. One is killing the bad guys, and two is negotiating with his counterparts in other states. And I think he puts Kim Jong-un and al-Baghdadi in those two very different categories.
Dr. Feffer, North Korea said that United States would be seriously mistaken to ignore the year-end deadline that North Korea had imposed on the United States to change its approach towards negotiations. What's your take on the opinions and perspective prevailing within the U.S. about this year-end deadline?
Well, at the moment, it doesn't seem like the Trump administration is taking it very seriously. Of course, it's still October, so we have 2 more months. And Donald Trump is not exactly a long-term planner. He generally responds to things on a day-by-day basis. So I can imagine he's not really thinking about North Korea right now. And, this is a pattern in U.S.-North Korean relations where, generally speaking, previous administrations have ignored North Korea, and Pyongyang has felt it necessary to get the attention of Washington once again. So my guess is that as we get closer to the deadline, into December, as North Korea makes more noises, more issues, more reminders that this is an upcoming deadline, we'll see North Korea finally appear again on the agenda of the president. But right now, there doesn't seem to be a lot of urgency here in Washington around this issue.
There has been Dr. John Feffer, Director of Foreign Policy in Focus at the Institute for Policy Studies. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, looking forward to seeing you again, either in Seoul or in Washington soon. Dr. Ko, what's your take on Dr. Pfeffer's analysis?
I think I largely agree with Dr. Pfeffer's analysis of the connection between what happened in the Middle East, in Syria, the killing of al-Baghdadi, and the possible lesson for Kim Jong-un. And I think the reason why there's not much of a connection between the two events, these two cases, is because I think the United States, especially President Trump, is on the defensive when it comes to the Middle East. He had made, in my view, serious mistakes, strategic mistakes in Syria by withdrawing the U.S. forces there. So the killing of al-Baghdadi is just making up for some of the major mistakes he has made. So still he has a lot of ground to cover to somehow justify his policy position in the Middle East. Whereas with North Korea, I think President Trump still has hope that this is going to be an asset for him, could possibly be part of his foreign policy legacy. So that's the reason why he's more optimistic about Kim Jong-un. That's why he still takes his personal relations with Kim Jong-un very seriously, and probably believes that's going to be the foundation for a possible agreement with North Korea.
I see. It is not just the United States that North Korea has been pressuring. The North sent a notice telling South Korea to tear down its facilities at the North Mountain Geumgang resort. Here's a short clip on Mountain Geumgang tours, a key symbol of past inter-Korean cooperation.
On October 25th, North Korea sent a notice to South Korea's Unification Ministry and Hyundai Group, a South Korean operator of the Mount Geumgangsan tour program. In a notice sent by the Mount Geumgangsan International Tourism Bureau, the North said it will establish a new international tourist district in the Mount Geumgangsan area and demanded that South Korean authorities come and tear down the facilities they built. The notice came after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ordered the removal of South Korean facilities at the tourist resort. Following the division of Korea in 1948 and the Korean War in 1950, the 1953 armistice left the two Koreas permanently separated. South Korea and North Korea signed an agreement to jointly develop the Mount Geumgangsan area in the north in 1989, under the initiative by the late Hyundai Group founder Chung Ju-young. On November 18, 1998, a ferry carrying South Korean tourists set sail for Mount Geumgangsan for the first time, in an historic moment in inter-Korean cooperation. By 2008, the accumulated number of tourists to Mount Geumgangsan hit 1.9 million. In 2007, the tour program posted record sales of $300 million. The South Korean government and firms built a range of facilities within the resort, including Geumgang Hotel, a floating hotel in Changjeonhang Port, which is considered a gateway to Mount Geumgangsan. Other facilities built by the South include Onjeonggak, a complex of restaurants and shops, the Hot Spring Village, and a center for reunions of war-separated families. The tour program was suspended in 2008 when a South Korean tourist was shot dead by a North Korean soldier after entering a fenced-off North Korean military zone. Some South Korean facilities were seized while others were left unattended for more than 11 years. The North's unilateral request to remove South Korean facilities is expected to cause huge losses for the South Korean government. North Korea has rejected South Korea's offer to hold working-level talks to discuss the withdrawal of facilities, leaving the fate of the tour program uncertain.
Dr. Go, I'm one of those confused people by recent remark by Chairman Kim Jong-un that he doesn't want to even have a look at the ugly facilities made by South Korean companies in Mountain Geumgang. But it's the same person who said at the beginning of this year that he would like to resume the operation of Mountain Geumgang tourism with no preconditions or with no price. What is the intention behind this?
Well, what Kim Jong-un said earlier this year was, it took place in a very different context compared to today. Earlier this year, when he made a remark, there's still a lot of optimism. Still cautious, but optimism about the progress being made on the denuclearization negotiations, as well as the development of the inter-Korean dialogue. But now, what happened throughout the summer is very telling because...
Oh, and their remark came before the breakdown of Hanoi summit.
Exactly, so there's that factor too. So, that's been a turning point for the negotiations as well as for the inter-Korean engagement. So what Kim Jong-un is saying right now has two layers. One is directed at, obviously, at South Korea, to remind South Korea that unless South Korea takes a more proactive, more unilateral approach towards helping North Korea economically, meaning violating the sanctions currently in place, North Korea is not going to keep actually engaged with South Korea. So that's the first layer. The second layer we have to understand is from the context of North Korea trying to mount the pressure on the United States. So North Korea has been launching missiles here and there, issuing aggressive statements, but that's not enough. Essentially, North Korea is trying to remind the United States that North Korea can make the Korean Peninsula very volatile by going after South Korea. So these are different measures different intentions that North Korea have behind the actions they are taking right now.
I see. So more pressure
Exactly.
on both South Korea and the United States. To find out how overseas experts are reacting to Chairman Kim's decision, we connect with Stephen Noerper, Senior Director of the Korea Society. Welcome to Peace and Prosperity, Dr. Noerper.
Thanks. Always nice to be on Arirang TV. Really appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks for the compliment. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ordered that all South Korean buildings at the North Mountain Geumgang resort to be torn down. In a rare move, Kim criticized even his own father, the former North Korean leader Kim Jong-il, who pushed ahead with this inter-Korean project, saying it was wrong to expect benefits by offering the area and depending on others. What could be Kim's intention behind such remarks?
Well, I think you should look at it two ways. One is domestically, he's clearly trying to show further consolidation of his leadership, a slight differentiation from his father, although it's the mainstay, the Kim family, that provides the ultimate legitimacy. And the fact that he has expressed an interest in the tourism angle before, certainly in the Wonsan development, and it appears that Geumgangsan is an area that he's interested in. There's also a bit of jockeying in terms of the inter-Korean relationship, and he's trying to needle Seoul a bit, especially in a year in which he's held off marking the anniversaries of the 2018 historic meetings and the comprehensive military accords. And lastly, he may be projecting internationally relative to a potential offer that was on the table in Stockholm, and that was to provide assistance in tourism because it doesn't violate sanctions, and that maybe this is partially a North Korean response to say, yes, we are interested in tourism development, and to take a step in that direction.
Dr. Noerper, North Korea is trying to develop tourism in order to increase its hard currency income, in order to fend off some of the pressure coming from the international sanctions regime. I mean, that could negatively affect the prospect of a successful negotiation with the United States. What's your take on this?
Well, it probably would be a very separate track, right? Because Kim Jong-un has, since April of last year, really put paramount importance on economic modernization. Clearly, he sees tourism development as part of that. The North Koreans understand that tourism is a way around international sanctions. So while they want sanctions relief in accord with having to make progress on denuclearization, they probably see this as something of an alternative. It may not stall those talks, though, because the incentives on lessening those sanctions are tremendous for the North Koreans. They need the relief. These sanctions have had a biting effect, especially the sanctions that were passed between 2016 and 2018, which are what the North Koreans are most concerned. It's cut off 90% of their imports and foreign exchange. So it's important for the North Koreans to see an easing. How would that take place? Probably first by way of inter-Korean economic cooperation, and South Korea would have to request from the UN Security Council some sort of pardon on that if the North Koreans are making progress toward denuclearization. And then, there would be a partial easing, and currently the talk in the denuclearization dialogue is about potentially trading off partial declaration, perhaps some verification, in exchange for some partial lifting of economic sanctions.
Stephen Noerper, Senior Director of the Korea Society. Thanks very much for sharing your insight and analysis with Peace and Prosperity.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, Dr. Go, it seems like he has a very complex view on the future between North Korea and the United States exchanging pressure. What do you take on this?
Well, I think, the sanctions still on the table clearly. That's the most important leverage that the United States has on North Korea. Tourism, as a strategic way for North Korea to fend off the pressure,
right.
It's a little bit complex than the way some people are describing it. The reason is because there are two ideas about this. The tourism restarting, Geumgang tourism, for instance, could represent a huge inflow of hard currency, but then that would be in violation of the sanctions currently in place. Even though tourism per se is not banned by the UN or US sanctions, because it allows for free people-to-people exchanges between North Korea and the international community. The scheme that's being discussed right now to restart tourism in North Korea involves the South Korean government mostly. And that would mean that the South Korean government is violating sanctions by promoting a large scheme to inject money into the North Korean economy through tourism. So that would, again, be in violation of the sanctions. So I think that's the reason why tourism, even though it looks like a way out, it is actually not.
There's a speculation that North Korea may run out of foreign currency as early as by 2021. And then North Korea needs to, precipitate the process of this international tourism. On the other hand, what would be the countermeasures by the Trump administration to counter these North Korea's countermeasures to Trump administration North Korea policy?
Well, I mean, North Korea can delay the day of reckoning, meaning the day when they run out of hard currency, by trying to come up with different schemes to make money, such as tourism. But it'll never be enough. It'll never be enough. Never be enough because North Korean's regime's expenditure has increased greatly after Kim Jong-un became the leader of North Korea. So, I mean, essentially it's a ledger, right? There's income and then expenditure, and expenditure way too big to make up for the diminished income. So, I mean, they're going to run out of money eventually. And then even though the sanction regime currently in place is not perfect, I mean, it's already acting also a pressure mechanism, a significant pressure mechanism in North Korea. That's why North Korea, in my view, has imposed its year-end deadline on the United States to change its negotiation approach and all that. So I think, I mean, in my view, Trump administration doesn't have to overdo anything at the present juncture. And I think one of the fears that some people have is that North Korea inevitably will have to launch another major provocation to remind the United States, act as a pressure mechanism on the United States. The mistake that the United States could make there is over-respond, to this provocation. I think the time, I mean, it's actually not on the United States to the scope, I mean, scale that President Trump believes. But I think with sanctions in place for a long time, finally it's going to born results that we expect.
I see. So nothing in excess, nothing
Exactly.
in a hurry. Okay, all right. All right, Senior Research Fellow at the Asan Institute, Dr. Go Myong-hyun has been with us. Thank you so much for your insight.
My pleasure.
And that's all we have for you today. We'll be back next week with more Korean Peninsula issues. Thanks for watching.